Ever had one of those moments, where everything just clicks or maybe shifts dramatically? A sudden realization that changes your whole perspective.
Ah, definitely. Those aha moments, or sometimes more like whiplash moments.
Exactly. Well, today we're diving deep into a story that is perhaps the ultimate example of that, a massive sudden transformation found right in the Bible.
We are. We're looking closely at Acts chapter 9. It's the famous account of Saul, who was fiercely persecuting the early Christians,
Right, a real enemy of the church.
and then has this dramatic encounter with Jesus himself on the road to Damascus. It completely turns his life around. He becomes the Apostle Paul.
An incredible story.
Right.
And to help us unpack it, we're focusing on the insights of a really respected New Testament scholar, Darrell Bock.
Mm-hmm. We'll be drawing on his commentary on Acts, specifically the Baker exegetical commentary. He's known for being very careful, very thorough in his analysis.
So our mission today is to really get into Bock's understanding of Acts 9, what he sees as the key takeaways, the significance of it all.
Mm.
Ready to jump in?
Let's do it. Bock really starts by emphasizing just how intense Saul's opposition was right at the beginning, Acts 9, verses 1 and 2.
Yeah, it says he was breathing threats and murder. That's vivid.
It really is. And Bock actually digs into that specific phrase. He writes, let me find the quote here. This is the only NT use of the term imnit for breathe. It is part of an idiom about breathing out threats and murder.
So it's not just a casual description.
Not at all, according to Bock. He says it shows Saul's highly hostile attitude toward believers. This wasn't just passive disagreement. This was active, aggressive antagonism. He was on a mission.
Okay, so Bock sets the stage by showing the sheer extremity of Saul's position before anything happens.
Precisely. It makes the transformation that follows even more, well, stunning. This wasn't someone sitting on the fence.
Then we get to the road to Damascus itself, verses 3 through 9, the bright light, the voice. It's cinematic.
It is. And Bock really zooms in on the words Jesus speaks. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? That last word is key for Bock. Me, not my followers or the church.
Exactly. Bock points out, and I'm quoting him again here, the account also shows how the Lord identifies with the church and considers its suffering as an attack against himself.
Wow. So persecuting the church is persecuting Jesus. That's a profound connection Bock highlights.
It really is, and it underlines another point Bock makes strongly. This whole event is about grace, undeserved grace.
Right. Saul certainly didn't do anything to earn this encounter. He was literally on his way to arrest more Christians.
Yeah, and Bock says this demonstrates how divine grace transforms even the life of a persecutor. It's a sovereign act, completely initiated by God.
And the immediate consequence is blindness. What does Bock make of that?
He sees it as symbolically significant, a physical reflection of Saul's spiritual blindness before the encounter. But also, it makes Saul completely dependent for the next few days.
Which leads us to Ananias in Damascus. Verses 10 to 19a. Ananias is understandably hesitant. You bet he is. He knows exactly who Saul is and what he's been doing. Lord, I've heard about this man. It's a very human reaction.
But God reassures him. How does Bock frame that?
Bock emphasizes God's clear plan. God tells Ananias that Saul is his chosen instrument. Despite everything Saul has done, God has a specific purpose for him.
So Ananias obeys, finds Saul, lays hands on him.
And his sight is restored. Bock quotes the text directly here, Acts 9:18. And immediately something like scales fell from his eyes, and he had sight, and arising, was baptized.
Scales falling from his eyes. Bock mentions a connection there, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. He points out a similarity to language used in the book of Tobit, specifically Tobit chapter 3, verse 17, and chapter 11, verse 13, which also talk about scales and the end of blindness.
So it's perhaps familiar imagery Luke uses to show a complete healing.
That seems to be Bock's reading. It underscores the reality and totality of the physical healing, which mirrors the spiritual transformation. And notice Bock points out the immediate baptism.
Right, just like the Ethiopian eunuch earlier in Acts. Belief followed swiftly by baptism.
Yep. It shows the pattern in the early church, a direct response to encountering Christ and believing.
Okay, so Saul can see he's baptized, he gets some food, and then what? Verses 19b through 22, he doesn't exactly lay low.
Not at all. He immediately starts preaching about Jesus in the synagogues in Damascus, the very places he might have intended to cause trouble.
The nerve, people must have been stunned.
Completely astonished, they knew his reputation. But Bock highlights something else here, Saul's
How
effectiveness.
so?
He points to verse 22, but Saul kept increasing in power and confounding the Jews who lived in Damascus by proving that this Jesus is the Christ. Bock focuses on that word confounding.
Confounding. What does Bock say about that specific word?
Well, he notes the Greek term, sunishinin, is related to a word used back in Acts 2, verse 6, describing the crowd being perplexed at Pentecost. But here, Bock suggests it implies more than just confusion.
Like, he's really shutting down the arguments against Jesus.
That's the idea Bock puts forward. Saul is so powerful in his reasoning, proving Jesus is the Messiah, that he's essentially silencing the opposition. They can't refute him.
What a turnaround. The chief prosecutor becomes the star witness, and a very effective one at that.
Absolutely. But as you'd expect, this doesn't go down well with everyone, particularly his former allies.
Right. Verses 23 to 25 talk about a plot to kill him.
Yes, the very people he was previously working with now see him as a dangerous traitor. Things get so bad, Bock notes, that Saul has to escape Damascus dramatically.
The whole basket over the wall scene, it shows the real danger he was already in.
It does. It underscores the cost of his conversion and his build new mission, and the danger doesn't stop there. He heads to Jerusalem.
Yes. Verses 26 to 30. And the reception there is chilly, to say the least.
Understandably, the disciples in Jerusalem are scared of him. They just can't believe he's genuinely converted. Can you blame them?
Not really. It must have seemed too good, or maybe too dangerous to be true. But then someone steps up for him.
Barnabas. Bock really highlights Barnabas's crucial role here. Barnabas, whose name means son of encouragement, lives up to his name. He takes Saul under his wing, vouches for him, introduces him to the apostles.
Without Barnabas, maybe Saul never gets integrated into the Jerusalem church.
It certainly seems Barnabas was key, according to Bock's reading. He bridges that gap of fear and suspicion. But even with Barnabas's help, Saul's boldness causes problems again.
He starts debating the Hellenistic Jews, the same group Stephen debated before he was killed.
Exactly. And history repeats itself in a way. They plot to kill Saul, too.
So the believers have to get him out of there for his own safety.
They send him off to Caesarea and then on to Tarsus, his hometown. It removes the immediate friction in Jerusalem.
Which brings us to the final verse of this section, verse 31. It feels like a concluding summary.
It does, and Bock sees it as quite significant. After all this turmoil, the persecution led by Saul, the shock of his conversion, the plots against his life, Luke gives this picture of the church.
What does Bock emphasize about this verse?
He quotes it, so the church throughout all Judea and Galilee and Samaria had peace and was being built up, and walking in the fear of the Lord and in the comfort of the Holy Spirit, it multiplied. Bock sees this as a key transition.
Peace and growth. After the chief persecutor is converted, and for a time, removed from the main centers.
Sort of, yeah. It's like Saul's conversion, while ultimately hugely beneficial, initially caused disruption. Once things settled slightly and maybe with Saul temporarily off scene, the church experienced this period of consolidation and growth described in verse 31. It shows God working through even these tumultuous events.
So looking back at Bock's whole analysis of Acts 9, what are the main threads he pulls out?
Well, definitely the radical, grace-driven nature of Saul's transformation. Also, that critical point about Jesus identifying himself completely with his followers, persecuting them, is persecuting him.
Right. And the immediate impact on Saul, blindness, healing, baptism, immediate preaching, no hesitation.
Exactly. And then the ripple effects, the astonishment, the plots, Barnabas's crucial role, and finally this period of peace and growth for the wider church. Bock paints a picture of God sovereignly turning even the fiercest opposition into a catalyst for the gospel's advance.
It's really powerful when you see it laid out through Bock's careful reading. It makes you think, doesn't it? How often do we maybe write people off or assume situations are fixed? Bock's take on Acts 9 really challenges that. It forces you to ask, what does this incredible story of Saul tell us about the potential for radical change? Maybe even in the people or situations we think are most impossible. How might God be working in ways we just don't expect?
That's a great question to ponder. It definitely shows that God's plans can unfold in the most surprising ways, transforming even the deepest hostility into fervent faith and service.
A lot to reflect on there. Darrell, Bock's insights really open up the depth of this amazing chapter.